Okay, we are good to go.
All right, welcome everyone. Today's class today is about how to manage stress. And before we get started, just a recap of the CDC guidelines that if you're doing this recording instead of a live class or a virtual class, you'll need to have direct interaction with your lifestyle coach after each session. So when you're done, you'll just do your, as you've learned before, do your action plan and then schedule a call with your lifestyle coach to go over it. Okay, so with that, so today we're going to talk about the causes of stress and what stress has to do with type 2 diabetes, ways to reduce stress, and then we're going to look at healthy ways to cope with stress. And lastly, we're going to make a new action plan.
Okay, so we'll start by talking about the causes of stress. And I'll take us to Barbara's story in the participant guide. So there are many things in our lives that can cause stress. And we see here in Barbara's story, I'll just go ahead and read the first 3 paragraphs for us. So Barbara is 45 years old. She feels pulled in all directions. Her children are still in high school. Her father has bad health problems. Plus, Barbara works full-time and is divorced. Barbara's doctor tells her she's at risk for type 2 diabetes. He urges her to lose weight by eating well and getting active. Barbara sighs. To her, taking care of herself is just one more thing to do. Okay, so we can see in Barbara's story, she has a lot going on. You know, she has kids, they're in high school, that's a stressful period for them. She has a father with health issues, she's dealing with a divorce, she's dealing with her own health issues. So I'm sure a lot of us can relate to what we see here in Barbara's story. And then, of course, we have a lot of other causes of stress in our life. So conflict with other people, maybe coworkers, family, friends. You might be experiencing health problems or money problems. Could be a new job or a new baby. That certainly shifts things in your life and can add some stress. Time is often something that stresses people out, or that feeling that you don't have enough time to do all the things you feel you need to do. You might have too many things on your to-do list and are stressing out about not being able to complete them all. You might be unhappy with your job or have a difficult work environment. Even something that sounds great, like vacation, that can sometimes be stressful as well, or even weddings, whether you're planning one or planning a trip to go to one. And then there are many more things. And, you know, this year we've been dealing with a lot. We just had the election, we've had wildfires, we're dealing with a pandemic. Even the holidays might be stressful. So there's always something going on in life, right? And the thing is, we can't make all of these stressors go away necessarily. But the one thing that we can do, or something that we do have control over, is how we cope with the stress. And Sharon's going to dive into what happens in the body when we are experiencing stress.
Thanks, Angie. So this is an important topic with diabetes and pre-diabetes. You think, well, what does stress have to do with it? And so, you know, Angie mentioned some of the causes of stress, and now let's look at the link between this stress and type 2 diabetes. So feeling stressed can actually change your body chemistry in a way that makes you more likely to get type 2 diabetes. It also can cause you to act in unhealthy ways. And those sound like, you know, profound statements, but, you know, it's amazing how some external thing in your life can affect you internally in the way your body moves, and also in how you act. All can be associated with the stress. So let's go back to page 3 of the participant guide. and look at a couple of lists on that page. So here are some things that you might feel. These are just some common feelings that we know stress can show up in a lot of different emotions. You can feel angry, annoyed, anxious, confused, impatient, sad, or worried. Another one I think of a lot of, and I've heard from other people, is overwhelmed. You know, there's just too much going on. So other ways it can show up in your physical self is you can have an aching head, a headache, a backache or neck ache, racing heartbeat, tight muscles, upset stomach. And I also think of like crunching teeth, grinding your teeth. That's another thing that a lot of people experience. So as you can see, it can stress. These are some emotions that we can feel with stress, and then some ways our body, it can show up in our body. And sometimes we don't even know we're feeling stress, but our body is feeling the stress. So being aware of these types of ways that stress can show itself. Okay, and then let's look on page 4. And there's more here. So back on Barbara's story. So here's, to make herself feel better after her doctor's visit, Barbara goes home and she eats a lot of ice cream. Well, it probably temporarily takes the stress away. So again, we look at the behaviors that we can do when we're stressed. And so some other ideas or things that can happen is drinking too much alcohol, forgetting things, putting off doing the things you need to do, rushing around without getting much done, or like a chicken with your head cut off. I know I'm guilty of that. Sleeping too little, too much, or both. Smoking, taking too much medicine, and working too much. You may also make unhealthy choices about eating or drinking. You can slack off on fitness goals and spend too much time watching TV or videos or using the computer. And these are all things that, we're all trying to work against, but it's just showing you one more thing that can be contributing, ways that stress can show up on our bodies and in our behaviors. So Barbara, let me just read the rest of that. Barbara has trouble saying no. Sorry, Angie. So she ends up doing things she really doesn't want or need to do. For instance, when she goes shopping with her kids, they often beg her to buy things. Usually she caves in to their demands just to make them stop. This makes Barbara feel stressed. So Barbara decides to get better at saying no. The next time she goes shopping with her kids, they beg her to buy ice cream. This time she says, no, no. And she holds firm. She is so proud of herself. All right, so let's look at a deeper look at what's going on in behind the curtains when we're stressed. So the key thing is about this hormone called cortisol. And I'm going to walk us through this. So what we have here in the picture is a kind of a cross section of the brain. And then we're looking at, on the left, what happens when there isn't any stress and how that affects our food, our eating. And then when there is stress and how that affects our eating. So let's start with the one on the left. It says no stress at the top. So we have two hormones that basically tell us to eat and we're through eating. So one is called ghrelin, Grelin, and that is in the stomach. And that is the hormone that tells us to eat. It stimulates our appetite. And the other one on the right side is leptin, and leptin lives in the fat cells, and that basically it inhibits or slows down your appetite, and by acting on the hypothalamus, which is really the control center of all that we do. So when things are working normally, when we're hungry, the stomach will secrete this hormone called ghrelin, which will tell the hypothalamus in the brain, I'm hungry, and and motivate you to eat. And then when you're full, leptin will secrete that into the hypothalamus and tell you, okay, I'm done. So it's a beautiful system when it's working. Now, if we look over on the B side where you see the Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is just to demonstrate stress. I mean, so it could, whatever the stress is, we're just going to call it a Tyrannosaurus Rex. So what happens is when we're stressed, we produce this hormone in excess called cortisol. And cortisol it's got another name of the stress hormone. And so imagine if you are, you're walking across the street and then all of a sudden a car comes racing and you just immediately, even though you can't run that fast, you're running as fast as you can so you don't get hit. What gives you that energy to do that is the release of cortisol into your bloodstream. So it has a really important purpose. It basically saves your life. But the problem is when we are under chronic stress and cortisol is in our bloodstream all the time, then all these other things happen. So we'll go through that. So as you recall, when you're hungry, ghrelin tells you to eat. But when you get cortisol too, now you've got two things that are telling you to eat. And so a chronically excess cortisol from chronic stress can make you just eat more than you think you should eat. So I know a lot of people have told me this, it's like when I get stressed, I just want to eat and I don't even know if I'm hungry. Well, that's cortisol doing its thing. The other thing that chronic excess cortisol can do is it can reduce the sensitivity of the hypothalamus to leptin. So what that means is the leptin is sending the signal that normally says, okay, I'm done. And the cortisol kind of overrides that and says, no, we're still hungry, even though you really aren't. So it actually helps keep your appetite up and therefore keep eating. Okay, and then this next one is when you think, you go, well, am I hungry or am I just stress hunger here? And so this is a great way to know. So stress hunger is basically emotional hunger, and you're going to see a quick onset with that. That means you're suddenly like, oh my God, I've got to eat. Whereas if it's a regular hunger, it kind of comes on slowly. It's just like, okay, I'm a little bit hungry. Okay, I'm getting more hungry. Where the stress one is, I'm hungry. And then the second part is, it's associated, the emotional one is associated with anxiety or stress, as we learned. And on the normal side, it's your feelings are fairly neutral. I'm just feeling okay. And then the last thing is that when you're at a stressful or an emotional type of hunger, the craving is specific. It's not like, well, just let me eat whatever. It's like, I need Doritos barbecue chips. It's really specific like that. And so whereas when you are regularly hungry, usually anything sounds good. So when you pay attention to, most importantly, if you're kind of noticing that hunger come on very quickly and it's for something specific, that's your body saying, okay, this is that cortisol is kind of acting up here. So that, and we're going to go into what you can do about it, now that you are aware of the difference between the two. So another thing to that way to deal with this is what we call intuitive eating. And intuitive eating is basically kind of really looking closer at your eating patterns and why they are happening. And these are two very important questions that can help you also decide if you are stress eating or you are just eating just because you're hungry. So those questions are, what do I feel? And what do I need? And then, so we're going to kind of go over those in a little more detail. So on this next slide, we'll look at the what do I feel? So we're just kind of deconstructing your eating behavior. And you see up here that some people cope with uncomfortable feelings and unmet needs by eating, binge eating, or food restriction. Many times people are not even aware. So these two simple questions, they pave the way to awareness and ultimately meaningful change. So the first thing is, what am I feeling right now? And a lot of times we go, well, I'm stressed, but it really helps to get more specific. And if none of these words seem to fit, you can always say, well, I just feel uncomfortable. But you see across the top here, we've got some kind of top words: fearful, angry, sad, joyful, disgusted, surprised, and shame. But under each one, they're a little more specific. Like fearful can be edgy, it can be frightened, it can be nervous. So you're really just, really helping to fine tune what that emotion is that you're feeling right at that moment. And just by being the more aware you are, the more you're able to kind of avoid this. So then the next step is what do I need? So let's say we said our emotion is nervous. I'm nervous, and that makes me eat. So on the next slide, it'll go into what do I need? And so what do I need right now to deal with my current feelings? And so these are some ideas. So, if your go-to is, well, when I'm feeling nervous, I eat barbecued Doritos. This is some other ways to deal with it. So what do you really need is, well, you might need distraction, you might need support, you might need to deal directly with the feeling, or you might need some self-care. I guess for me, if I were feeling nervous and everything, I would probably call a friend, but that's me. Someone else might want to go for a walk outside. You have to find what works for you. And if you find that there's a specific what do I feel, and that you typically respond to with food. So let's say it's being in the presence of somebody who just kind of rubs you wrong, and every time you're away from them, you'll have some ice cream. And that those two things are connected. So what you do there is you take the emotion you're feeling from that situation, and beforehand, like before this is even happening, look at this list or think of what else you could do instead of having that ice cream. So basically, you're kind of like taking this and putting it in your back pocket. And so when that next time comes where you're dealing with that situation, you already have this idea in place. And that's really important, because if we don't have it in place, we're just going to react and do what we normally do. And it might not work the first time, but the more you might start having some ice cream, put it down, and then go for a walk. And eventually, maybe you'll just go for a walk. So it just takes practice, but you're basically practicing dealing with an emotion in a way not only other than with food, but also in a way that really addresses that emotion, and more importantly. And so, you're going to be taking care of yourself in a much better way. Okay, and then what's the next slide?
All right. Well, I think it's my turn.
Okay.
And so I just want to add that, this is a really great tool. Sharon just walked us through all of this, and we took these from a one-page handout. So if this is something that you think would be really useful for you, reach out to us. We can make sure you have a copy. Maybe this is something you want to put on your fridge or just have available for you in your home when you do maybe tend to stress eat or emotional eat, and then you can take a look at this handout. And so next we're gonna talk about ways to reduce stress. So again, there unfortunately is no surefire way to prevent stress. You might lose your job, a loved one, or even you might get sick, someone you love might pass away. So there certainly is always going to be stressors in our lives, right? And we'll go back to Barbara's story and talk about different ways to reduce some of this.
Looks like I gave you a preview on that.
You did. So Sharon already kind of walked us through what Barbara did here. So on page 4, we read about how Barbara started using the technique of saying no. And that became a really powerful tool for her. You know, when she was in the grocery store and her kids were begging her to buy ice cream, she finally stood firm and said no. And that was a way to help her reduce stress in her life. And so that's a really powerful tool, and we'll see it on these next pages, page 5, ways to reduce stress in your handout. And so I'll just take us through some of these. So asking for help, you know, I know that can be hard for some people, but it's really important to recognize if you are feeling overwhelmed and stressed, you have too much on your plate. It's really important for you to ask a friend or family member for help. Because you know they care about you. I'm sure they'd be happy to help. And if it takes something off of your plate, that can be really helpful for your stress management. The next step is be tidy. So keeping your things in order or organized, that can be really helpful. A lot of us don't think about how our surroundings or our environment can affect our mindset. But if you walk into a messy house, you're most likely going to pick up on that subconsciously, and versus if you were to walk into a clean, tidy, organized house, you're going to feel much better. The next one is get enough sleep. Sleep is so important. Here it says shoot for 8 hours per night. You figure out what works best for you and what your body's calling for, but sleep is huge in terms of managing your stress and then also making sure that your hunger hormones, the ones that Sharon was walking us through, making sure some of those hunger hormones are doing what they need to do and they're not thrown off by a lack of sleep. Having fun, that's a big one. So make sure you make time for fun and play. You know, a lot of us, we don't make enough time for that in our lives these days. So that's something to keep in mind too. And then just saying no. We saw that in Barbara's story, and we've heard from a lot of people in the past that this is a really difficult one, especially as women who tend to take on that caretaker role, and they tend to take on too much of some of those caring duties with loved ones in their lives. And it's that whole saying of you can't pour from an empty cup, or, you know, you need to put your oxygen mask on first. So sometimes saying no is a really important way to make sure that you're taking care of yourself so that in the future you can better show up for people in your life. And I think that goes along well with knowing yourself. So really understanding what your stressors are and how you react to those stressful moments. And like Sharon walked us through, there are many different strategies for coping with that, but find which one works for you in each certain situation so that when those come up, you know exactly what you need to do. Making to-do lists. I love lists, and that's certainly helpful for me to manage my priorities and manage my stress, making sure I'm feeling organized with my tasks and what I need to be getting done. So that's a really great tool. And then reminding yourself, whether you use notes or calendars or timers, that can be really helpful for staying on top of some of this as well. And then setting small or doable goals. We know we talk about this a lot with the action plans. So making sure that whatever your big picture goal is, there's certainly ways you can break that down into smaller, more doable goals so that you don't feel overwhelmed or you don't feel like you failed if you didn't accomplish the big picture goal, but you're still accomplishing some of the smaller pieces and making progress towards whatever goal you might have. And then solving problems is on here. So they say when you have a problem, try to solve it promptly. That way it won't become a source of stress in your life. So again, that might be a challenging thing, tackling problems head on, but really it is kind of the best way to go to make sure that you just handle it head on and can move forward. And then taking care of your body and mind. So that's going to help you handle stressful situations much better. Again, we talked about sleep, maybe movement and physical activity is part of your self-care, your body and mind care. And that's something that we don't see stressed enough in this session in particular, but movement and exercise can be a really, really great tool for stress management and just helping balance our minds so that we can handle those stressful situations much better. Another important ones that we thought of that aren't necessarily on this list, I have written down, take time for yourself. So again, a lot of us, we're just so busy helping others, and maybe you have kids you're taking care of, a partner and parents, and we want to be there for everyone, but it's also important to take time for yourself, whatever that might be, whether it's going on a walk or taking a bath or reading a book, but making sure you do have time for yourself as well. And then another important one is practicing gratitude and optimism. So that's a really, really important tool if you are trying to manage your stress, but also kind of change your mindset with how you handle stress. So a lot of studies have shown that if you have a gratitude journal or you're practicing that every day, that does help you kind of rewire your brain from a less negative headspace to a more positive, optimistic headspace. So those are really great tools as well. And then now that we've talked about some of that, we will also touch on healthy ways to cope with stress. So this is going to be on pages 6 and 7 of your handout. And I'll talk us through some of these. Okay, so here they have some quick tips for maybe if you are experiencing stress in the moment, what can you do? So here's the tip of counting to 20 in your head. So just giving your brain a quick needed break. Maybe you close your eyes. Maybe you sit down, feel a little bit more grounded. And then you find a way to soothe yourself. So maybe that's you schedule a massage, or you take a hot bath at the end of the day. You have a cup of herbal tea, or you put on some calming music. Maybe you go for a walk, whatever it might be for yourself that feels soothing. And then give yourself a pep talk. So that might sound silly, but stand in front of a mirror or whatever and just talk yourself through this. That can be really calming as well. And then trying to relax. So again, finding what that is for you. Maybe it's stretching or doing some exercise and moving and physically moving that stressful energy out of your body. And here on page 7, we have a few more examples. So again, taking a breather, maybe that's doing breathing exercises, meditating, talking about your feelings is really important, whether that's with a friend or a therapist. And like Sharon walked us through with intuitive eating, just that practice of naming what your feelings are and recognizing those emotions in that moment is a really, really great exercise. And then cutting back on caffeine, if that's an issue for you, that can certainly leave you feeling jumpy or anxious and maybe more prone to hyperactive or stress. And then one of our favorites is getting moving. So making sure you're walking or exercising regularly, that will be really helpful. And of course, doing something fun, we've talked about that. But I think some of the big ones we see here in this lesson, and maybe something new that you guys could walk away with today, are these practices of meditation. There's also some breathing exercises. So there's so many different breathing exercises out there. I'm certainly not an expert, but if you were to look up different options and find the one that's right for you, that can be a really powerful tool just to bring us back into our body. Connecting with our body and our breath can really bring us back to that resting mindset versus the fight or flight, stressed out mindset. And then another one that they've talked about in this lesson is the idea of muscle relaxation. So whether you're laying down on the floor or your bed or you're sitting in your chair, it's a practice of clenching. So say you start at the bottom of your body. So with your toes, your feet, you clench your toes and your feet, and then you'll relax them. And you do that as you slowly move up the body. So then you'll clench your legs and relax it, clench your torso, your stomach, And then you'll clench your arms, relax it, move up to your neck, your shoulders, your head. So it's just this process of moving through your body, being really present in your body, and practicing that, feeling that tension, and then relaxing and feeling that relaxation throughout your whole body. So that again is a really great way to just kind of slow down your breath, your heart rate, and just kind of relax you and bring you back to the moment. And so those are some really great things to walk away with today. And before we do that, we want to give you the opportunity to practice. So we have a little meditation for you. I'll make sure I share my sound. Okay, so we invite you to do this meditation with us.
It's a minute.
And welcome to Headspace. So no matter what's going on in your life right now, no matter how many thoughts are racing around your mind, no matter how the body's feeling, just take a moment to sit down and take a big deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, a sense of taking in fresh air, the lungs expanding. As you breathe out, a sense of letting go of any stress in the body, in the mind, just feeling the muscles soften and relax. And close your eyes if you'd like to. One more. Breathing deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just take a moment to pause. Allow the thoughts to come and go. And then just gently opening the eyes again.
All right. Is it my turn?
It is.
Okay. Thank you, Angie. I actually really enjoyed that, even though it was for a minute. Sometimes just checking out briefly to kind of what that does is, you remember the cortisol? If you don't, when you take that pause away, the cortisol instantly goes down. So, and even if it's just for a minute, so giving your body a break from that cortisol entering into your bloodstream and doing all that crazy stuff it likes to do can just take a minute. So really, it's a good thing to practice. So as Angie mentioned, we talked about the ways to reduce stress on page 5. So between now and the next session, you should be a great idea to write down what you will do to make your life less stressful. I mean, there's a lot of ideas there. And then also there were some ideas in the what do I feel, what do I need? You might have something very specific, behavior that you're trying to deal with, or some emotion you're trying to deal with. And so take this time. This is a really important time to really just say, okay, what can I do to handle these? So moving forward, because those stressors will be there again, how am I going to handle these? So I'm going to do it better next time. I'd also like you to practice saying no. Pick something each day that you don't want or need to do, but would normally say yes to. And instead of saying yes, say no. And obviously it's got to be something that's going to be okay for you to do, but find something that's just kind of small that we just typically do. We all have those little things. And it might be something as simple, not even with another person, but to yourself. Like when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is pick up your phone and check your messages. And you can say, no, I'm going to go, have a cup of tea first and look at the beautiful day, and then I'll check it. So just little things like that, just kind of making a little change there. Okay, so then the next thing we'll do is we'll look at the action plan. And keep in mind from the last one you did, what worked and what didn't work well for you, and if there's any changes you want to make. And also keep in mind what we discussed today about how to manage stress. And to make an action plan work for you, and you're finding some action plans are like, well, I keep doing the same one, but it's not working. See if it has these 4 qualities to it. Is it realistic? Is it doable? Is it specific enough? Is it flexible so you can change it up as depending on what it is? So remember to focus on behaviors, and more importantly, try to have fun with this, because that's a real important part of making change. Is you got to have a good time doing it. So we've come to the end of the session. So today we discussed how to manage stress. We talked about some of the causes of stress, the link between stress and type 2 diabetes. We looked at some ways to reduce stress and some healthy ways to cope with stress. So, so what we'd like you to do now is just to get your action plan done, and remember to go through all those things that that will help you focus on stress. And then when you're done, contact your lifestyle coach to schedule a short call. And then after the call, oh yes, and bring your weight and your physical activity minutes. So you'll need those every week, and then you're done. So thanks for coming to this session, and we'll see you next time.